All right, we're going to go ahead and get started. Our mid-month update. Let's see. Last week was a good week. Neil was on a pretty cool podcast, Crypto 101.
Woo!
And we successfully updated our risk terminal to, I think, be more usable and have the data itself be presented in a way that can be sort of looked at. And you can essentially just get a better understanding of the data now that you can view it all on one screen. So that was exciting to go through that process. And then this week we, from just a high level, are working on finalizing some partnerships, as well as just continued work on the risk and research angle, which Joey will talk about here in a second. But first, Neil, do you want to just sort of talk about what the podcast was like? If there's anything in particular that they highlighted or you highlighted that you think is worth sharing. And I will actually share that link in the community call discussion channel for anyone who wants to check it out.
Yeah, so we recorded that probably 3 weeks ago, and it's amazing how much changes between in 3 weeks in crypto. But one of the things that it seems like the Crypto 101 podcast, their audience is like people trying to get like some education about how to get started in DeFi. So I kept it pretty high level. And it seems like they were very interested in this difference between DeFi 1.0 and DeFi 2.0, which is which I didn't want to dig too deep into it because it really doesn't have a ton to do. DeFi 2.0 doesn't have a ton to do with sort of like these lending statistics that we have currently published. But one of the things that I said was that a lot of the DeFi 2.0, one of the big I don't even know specifically where the lines are between 1.0 and 2.0. But I do know some example, like Aave is clearly 1.0, Ohm is clearly 2.0, and then everything else fits on some spectrum with those as, endpoints. But I think that a lot of the DeFi 2.0 stuff is very it's super optimistic, so it works really well in a bull market. And then I'm curious to see how it all holds up in bear market scenarios, because it doesn't seem like a lot of the DeFi 2.0 stuff doesn't seem like bear market plays as much as they are about. It's not as much about downside as it is about upside. So
just looking at the reaction from the Olympus DAO community, 2.0 has a tough time with adverse market effects.
Yes. I think that so many people came in this year, and that they're the sweet summer children of DeFi. So we've been looking at this stuff since like 2018. So the idea that stuff just goes up, that's never been our MO. Looks like Joey's got his hand up.
Well, I'm inviting Joey up to speak and have him talk about some stuff.
But yeah, I had a great talk with Blake. I think that we got into some really interesting stuff. He was also super interested in like environmental effects of cryptocurrency, which is something we should all be concerned about. But I'm a little more optimistic on that front than I am necessarily about the up-only attitude of crypto. So,
as soon as Joey jumps onto the speaker panel, we can hear from him.
Goodbye.
Or not. It should appear as an invite.
Can you hear me?
There we go.
Yep.
Hey guys.
Hey Joey, how you doing?
Pretty good. Still bad at accepting invites, but otherwise great.
Cool. So I think we can talk about a little bit of our risk terminal, and we noticed some interesting movement happening on some of those charts when the market took a downturn. And I think you have some interesting insights onto the correlation or lack thereof when it comes to what our metrics were showing. So I'll let you take the floor.
Totally. Thanks, Moment. So yeah, I mean, watching VAR drop by like half of its value from around 4 billion for both Aave and Compound down to about 2.5 for both Aave and Compound over the same week that Bitcoin and I think ETH took some heavy hits. Definitely made me think like, oh, I wonder if our model is picking up some of that decline in price of those tokens. But looking into it, and I'm actually just finishing up a report on this, which will hopefully be on our risk library very soon. Um, it turns out that actually what the model was doing was it was tracks basically all these token movements over the last year and finds the days where the movements would have caused like the worst changes for the portfolio, and then returns sort of those kind of almost worst case scenarios as your possible loss. And there was just like a huge window in January of last year, beginning of January 2021, that was contributing a lot to both Compound and Avsvar. And it happened that that window left our 1 year sampling period at the same time as ETH and Bitcoin prices dropped. So it looked like the price drop was doing something for the VAR, but on closer inspection, actually, the model is just not considering price shocks to the market that happened more than a year ago. And some of the biggest price shocks happened in January, the first week of January 2021. And as we move out of that week, the model no longer considers that a risk. So not quite related to the drops recently, but still interesting coincidence. Yeah, should be relatively quick, but even for us, we started this last week and we started running into some issues with the data we were getting because, as you know, Credmark is still building up our own data pipeline and platform, and so some of the data we get for some of these models is coming from all sorts of places, and it kind of gets messy. And what we've been doing for the last, I think, 5 days, rather than actually just being able to like backtest and model validate and publish this result, we've been sort of like I don't know how to describe it, just like wading through data and trying to like just validate that the data we're getting is actually the same as the data we were getting before. And it's just been a big mess. So as much as anyone, I'm looking forward to Credmark's clean, beautiful data pipelines so that I can build models instead of pulling my hair out over whether the data I'm getting is actually what I want.
Well, yeah, I think, and on that, I wanted to invite Peter, who is one of our newest contributors, who is currently working on our own data ETL. How you doing, Peter?
Hello, can everyone hear me?
I can hear you.
Awesome. Yeah, super excited to have recently joined the Credmark team. Can't believe it's already been over a month. Just crazy how fast time flies. But yeah, it's been awesome working with everyone and seeing how passionate we're all about DeFi. So yeah, the data pipeline.
Yeah, so I was just gonna. So Joey's point, I think, is probably the pain points he's having are probably true for many people like Joey in many DeFi protocols. Just trying to figure out, is the data I'm looking at correct? Um, does having your own, like being able to, from like the bare metal up to like where Joey's at, having control of the data, does that address that issue in any way? Is this like an issue of using a third party service to source data, like the Graph or Dune or whoever, or is this like a deeper issue just about like data in general, or like where can we make, how can we as Credmark and the work that you're doing make Joey's life easier?
Yeah, well, I mean, part of it is definitely just the data is um, hard to kind of shape into the way that is easy for us to want to analyze in the way that we want. But that is the benefit of having our own data pipeline is that if if the data isn't working a certain way, we can go in there and make those modifications so that it is easier to work with.
Cool. Yeah, so just more broadly speaking, I think you've been working at this problem now for a few weeks, 3 weeks to a month. And any interesting just insights now that you're actually working on building our own ETL? Interesting things you've come across, problems, like what's the experience been like? Because you're kind of working in a silo, so to speak, from the rest of the project. And so I think even us here at Credmark are interested in sort of the nuances of the work you're doing.
Yeah, I mean, I can go through kind of a high level overview of the data pipeline. Not sure what like the technical background is of people listening, so I'll try to keep it high level while still kind of touching on some of the main technologies that we're using. But we're one of like the main goals for the data pipeline was to be as technology and cloud platform agnostic as we can be. Um, so that kind of led us into containerization as the way to go. And when Kubernetes cluster anywhere. Um, like, but we wanted to follow the infrastructure as code philosophy, so we can codify our infrastructure and version control it as well. And so for that, we're using Terraform, which for those not familiar with it, it's a open source infrastructure as code software tool that essentially allows you to define your cloud infrastructure using a declarative configuration language, which has a ton of benefits. The main one being that it makes it very easy to reproduce our cloud infrastructure. So in the future, like anyone will be able to clone our repo and run and apply some Terraform commands. And within a few minutes, spin up all the necessary services in the cloud that we're using for our data pipeline, which in our case is spinning up an EKS Kubernetes cluster in AWS. And like another benefit of it is obviously like the version control aspect of the infrastructure. If we make any changes and we break our infrastructure, it's very easy to roll back to a previous version that was working. So Terraform is definitely like a key piece to that. And so, we have Terraform, we have Kubernetes, which is the orchestration layer. But what's actually running on Kubernetes is an open source platform called Argo Workflows, which is a container native workflow engine um, that allows, it's basically like the actual data pipeline piece. And so each workflow or each step in the workflow is essentially a container performing some task. Like one task would be running a tool called Ethereum ETL, which allows us to extract data from the blockchain. And then like that, like we pull data out and it dumps it into like S3, which is a data store in AWS. And then we can have like another container which takes the data and loads it into a database. And so you can kind of start to see how like you can start to stitch together like a data pipeline that's very modular and also very scalable because of the properties of Kubernetes. Um,
Just a quick
are there any
question.
questions so far? Yep.
Yeah. So for anyone listening, the community call discussion channel is open for questions whenever by whoever. But I just have a curiosity about the way we're building this. How easy is it to like lift and move to another EVM compatible chain, like Avalanche, for example? Um, what things are missing, or is it like just kind of like right now we could do that and sort of provide the same service on a different chain? Like what would that entail?
So for that wouldn't affect that wouldn't affect Kubernetes. Like Kubernetes is just simply the orchestration layer that just runs containers. The piece that would need to change is on the Argo workflows part, the containers. We're currently using a open source tool called Ethereum ETL. I think it's built by Nansen AI. And so that if we wanted to, for example, support Avalanche, assuming that Avalanche is using like kind of like the same, or like I believe like we could use Ethereum ETL to pull the same data from Avalanche, since they're essentially the same, or they share a lot of the same similarities. So worst case scenario, it would be relatively easy to add the functionality that we would need to this open source tool, Ethereum ETL, so that we could start pulling from Avalanche. And then the rest of the workflow would be relatively the same. That's kind of like the power of using containers, is that when you separate everything into different steps via containers, you just really need to like alter the step that's actually grabbing the data. And then the rest of the steps are essentially going to be just like taking the data, loading it somewhere, or everything's kind of like separate. So it's not what's the word I'm looking for? Um, I guess to answer the question, it wouldn't be that much of a lift. It would be like a simple thing to like change to make that work.
Cool. That's good to know. Yeah, I think a lot of that a lot of that's pretty technical, but from what I'm taking away is that we're building this such that it can be reproduced and scale without too much of a headache. So doing more work now to do less work later, sort of, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Cool. All right. Well, yeah, like I said, we're open for questions. Thank you so much, Peter. Glad to have you on the team and looking forward to the progress you make. While I'm waiting for any questions, I'm going to drop a few links in the community call channel. We have reorganized how the risk library looks as far as a structure perspective. That's this first link is the introduction to that. Actually, no, this is the introduction. And while it's still fairly sparse, we did add two new the beginning sort of analysis of two protocols, being Curve Finance and more of like a generalized view of Aave. So that will be the next two links that I share. And what's interesting about these is that we've developed a template for when we're analyzing these protocols to start off. And we're hoping to leverage the community in some capacity to generate more of these sort of protocol templates. So if you look in our channel, I shared the intro to the risk library, which kind of shows the new structure, which Matthias helped design. So thanks, Matthias, for that. And then Nish's team, composed of Rahul and Shivam, did some cursory analysis of Curve and Aave. And then the final link is a link to where the template lives. And you can kind of see how the work that they did sort of lines up with how the template looks. So my hope is that maybe not next week, maybe by February, we have a plan in place to leverage our community to do some of this work, obviously incentivized in some way or another. So hopefully sooner rather than later, we can get started on that. Finally, this next few weeks, we're still very much in build mode, but the couple partnerships that we have lined up, I think are going to be pretty significant. And I'm excited to talk more about that. And I think when Collier is back for our next call, he can have some more to say on that. So if there are no more questions, we can end this here. This recording will be made available for anyone who wasn't here. If you want to listen back for whatever reason, we'll have that up shortly. And in the interim between now and the next call, share your alpha on the DeFi Alpha channel, ask questions, poke around the risk library, and hang tight to the next call. Hope you all have a good week, and I'll talk to you all very soon. Take care.